that fall under that title. And inshallah, we are going to start covering them one after the other. The first hadith is compliments of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Now, there is some length to this hadith, some language to this hadith. So instead of narrating the entire hadith, I'm just going to break it down and move forward like that. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, قال Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, meaning this is what type of hadith? Hadith al-Qudsi. Thank you very much. Good crowd tonight. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كُلُّ عَمَلِ ابْنِ آدَمَ لَهُ إِلَّا الصِّيَامِ. Every deed of the son of Adam, lahu, belongs to him, إِلَّا الصِّيَامِ, except for fasting. فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. Verily fasting is for me, and I will grant the reward for that. So the first thing for tonight, we're going to dissect this phrase. The son of Adam, every deed belongs to him except for fasting. That belongs to me, I'm going to reward that. Every deed that we do, the son of Adam has some entitlement towards it except for fasting. What does this statement mean? Isn't the prayer that we offer for Allah? The zakat, isn't that for Allah? Isn't the hajj for Allah? Everything that we do, it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does this phrase mean that, every deed, that's for the son of Adam. All of the deeds of the son of Adam are for him, but fasting is for me. Scholars of hadith have explained this and interpreted this in many ways. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah in his book has mentioned 10 different opinions of what this phrase means. What this phrase means and what it could mean. And then he weighs in and he gives, he picks his few favorites that he understands to be correct. One of the meanings of this, إِلَّا الصِّيَامِ فَإِنَّهُ لِي, fasting is for me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights the deed of fasting and he shows the possession to himself to display its significance over the other deeds. For example, Baytullah, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that mean that this is not the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And all other masajid besides Baytullah are not the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There is a significance and an importance to Masjid al-Haram over all of the other houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is highlighting the significance of fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing, He is highlighting its special rank and uniqueness over the other deeds. Now, another explanation for this is that the general rule of thumb, the general rule for deeds are what? If you do one deed, you get what? You get 10 hasanat. Man ja'a bil hasanati, falahu ashru amthaliha, right? And then there's also a formula that when 10 can be multiplied to 700 ila ad'afan kathira, right? So there is a certain formula that deeds, the reward of deeds are recorded by. So the kiraman katibin, the one who writes the good deeds, when a good deed is performed, he is told to record it based on a certain formula. So they do that. But when it comes to fasting, the reward is so immense, there is no formula for that. The angels record it as one fast. That's it. Now, what that is going to translate to, that is beyond their comprehension. That is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to expose to us on the Day of Judgment. It is so big, so immense that it cannot be recorded, and it does not fall under the general principle and the formulas that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to the angels. Number 3, every deed is for the son of Adam except for fasting. We know that on the Day of Judgment, there will be certain people who may confront us for accounts receivable. If we have violated anyone, violated anyone's haqq, if we have hurt someone's feelings, what happens on the Day of Judgment? In a hadith by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the very famous hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Sahaba who was bankrupt, right? And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responds, after their response, that a bankrupt person is he who comes on the Day of Judgment with fasting. On the Day of Judgment, he will come with deeds. And then what will happen? the good deeds will be given to that person, and if they run out, the bad deeds, the evil deeds will be put on that person. Except for fasting. Fasting is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will preserve and protect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow the reward of fasting to be used in that distribution process. That is one explanation that is given. Now, Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he explains, and then he has a response for these things later on, but just for us to understand the general meaning. The fourth explanation that it's given, that when it comes to ibadat and worship, there are people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are people who worship idols. Right? There are mushrikeen, pagans. A pagan or a mushrik will worship their god or their idol with fasting, for example, sadaqah, with bowing down, ritual worship, right? Going around it like tawaf. But something that pagans did not do with their idols was what? Fast for them. That is something that was exclusive for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So fasting is something that is exclusive for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not done for any other god or any other idol besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then another meaning behind, another explanation is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the fact that out of all of the deeds that are done, the most secretive and the most discreet deed that is out there is fasting. When you go for Hajj, a person can tell if you're doing Hajj. Why? Because you're wearing the ihram, right? If you're praying, someone can see you praying. Your sadaqah can be seen. The person who takes it sees the deed. But when it comes to fasting, fasting is not the name of doing something, it's the name of not doing something. It's the name of not doing something. So when a person's not eating, not drinking, that could very easily mean that they're just not eating, they're not drinking, they're not hungry. If I see you during the daytime, just because you're not eating all the time, right? Or just because you don't have a granola bar in your pocket all the time. I mean, who eats all the time? No one eats all the time. So when you're not eating, you can't necessarily say that that person's fasting. Oh, mashallah, all of you are fasting over here right now. Mashallah. Why? Because you're not eating. So fasting is such a discreet. This is why it comes in the stories of the awliya and the pious predecessors, that they would go by years and years of fasting without anyone knowing. Oh, I just skipped lunch. I'm not hungry. I'm not in the mood. They would go by years and years. Subhanallah. So, As-Sawm illa as-Siyam fa innahu li wa ana ajzi bi, and I will give the reward for that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then another explanation is given showing its significance. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the rewards and the deeds set out, and a person will be rewarded and their ajr will be given. But when it comes to fasting, it's like when we work, right? When we work or we have our business, we profit at the end of the month, we get our paycheck. Wa ana ajzi bihi, I will personally see to it. I will personally see to this recompense. You did your mizan, everything? All right, now is the time for this reward. Get ready. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to witness the month of Ramadan. Jazakumullahu khair. A few other announcements.